Everybody, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Yale SOM Perspectives Black Voices event. This is our kickoff event to our lineup of spring diversity recruiting events, and I'm super excited about this event, particularly starting off in Black History Month, but also with this specific group of students. My name is Jordan Brooks. I'm the Associate Director for Community Inclusion here at Yale SOM, where I lead the diversity recruiting initiatives, and I sit on the MBA admissions committee. Overall, a lot of my work in the department goals are really to increase MBA access, serve as a resource for students within the school, as far as like D&I related issues, and then ultimately enrich the experience of historically underrepresented students. So today we're here to answer your top 5 questions. We changed things up a little bit with this event, so where we really wanted the questions and the conversation to be cultivated from you all as participants, and not us just asking questions to our student panelists. So we asked you all to submit your top 5 questions, and that's what we'll be answering. So we'll kick it off with the students answering and responding to those top 5 questions that are most important to you, and then probably break off and to have some more intimate convos and some breakout rooms with you and one of the student volunteers that we have. So before we get into questions, I'm going to ask our volunteers and student panelists to introduce themselves. Can we hear your name, where you're from, and what industry you came into prior to SOM, and maybe some post-MBA plans? Ray, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining. My name's Ray Clark, Rachel Clark. I am originally from Southern California, and I was working in finance, doing corporate strategy in Miami before SOM. I'm currently a first-year MBA student here, and I did the finance track, so I will be going back into finance and doing investment banking this summer at Citi. And I also just want to mention I was really involved in a lot of diversity programs like MLT, TWIGO, and the consortium. So if you guys have any questions about those programs or finance, I'm your girl.
Thanks, Ray. Steven?
Hey guys, it's really nice to see you all. My name is Stephen Waller. I am also a first-year MBA student in the program. Before coming to SOM, I was actually living in Atlanta and working for Accenture as a tech consultant. And I'm looking to pivot into strategy consulting. And so I will be back in Atlanta, but at EY Parthenon this summer, interning in their strategy division. And I also did MLT, and I'm a member of the consortium like Ray. So if you have any questions, I can also help answer those, but happy to be here.
Thank you. And Jordan?
Hi, everyone. My name's Jordan. My pronouns are he, him. My background's in psychology and consulting, and I'm coming to get my MBA because I decided I hate consulting. And this summer, I'm going to open an enterprise, a social enterprise that focuses on using the mixture of experiential learning and exposure therapy to help people address their racial, gender-based or sexuality-based bias. I'm one of the BBA leaders, that's the Black Business Association, so is Stephen. And I'm also one of the out-of-office leaders, so happy to talk about intersectionality. I think about it every day.
Perfect. Thank you all. Just to set some context for the way the event is going to go. So we'll answer these top 5 questions. It should take about 20 to 25 minutes or so. And then, like I said, we'll break off. We'll end the recording and then break off into smaller breakout rooms where you'll be in the room with one of the 3 student volunteers. And I'll hang back in the main room if you have specific questions around the application or our evaluation process with admissions. But feel free to have those open conversations with the student volunteers as you will, and then hop back and forth. And then we'll kind of wrap up around like a 12:40 or so. So we'll get started with the first question, and I'm gonna just start off with Ray. Why did you choose Yale?
Sure. So I was really enticed by the mission of business and society. I want to go into the more public policy space after a few years in finance. And I think it's really true that students here are very interested in like succeeding in business, but they want their businesses to have positive social impacts. And then another main factor of why I chose Yale was when I was doing research and reaching out to people and figuring out, after I was accepted into a few different schools, I reached out, like cold messaged people on LinkedIn and wanted to learn more about their careers. And the people from Yale always responded. They always were like happy to talk with me, and they were just very warm. And I felt that I could really take advantage of the alumni network and have more like a mentorship experience at Yale. So I'm so happy I came here.
Perfect. Jordan, how about yourself?
I think Ray stole all of my points quite beautifully. I'll add, I think the main difference is people who are looking to start your own company. There are an abundance of resources that the social entrepreneur can get here. And if you're looking to do something that benefits the world, you have a tremendous amount of support to do it. Size City, a bunch of grants. So I think just to echo Ray's point, that Yale really focuses on business and society, and that's why I chose it.
Cool. Steven?
Yeah, all of those points are very similar to my reasons. I will just say another reason I chose SOM was the integrated curriculum with the larger Yale University, which kind of essentially means that, you know, when you get to the electives portion of your curriculum, you can take electives in the business school or outside of the business school. So you can take electives at like the law school or like the divinity school. And that was really important to me because I know that this will most likely, like 99%, be my last time in school. And so I really wanted to learn about things outside of business as well while I had the chance to do that.
Steven, I feel like that's what most people say. This is their last time being in school. I know I said that
This is
5
it.
years ago, and here I am in a doctorate program. So I hear you, but you'll probably continue. So now that we got that question out of the way, I think that's the most general question that gets asked with all of the panels. Why did you choose Yale? It's an easy layup question that, you know, kind of sets the tone. The rest of the questions that you all ended up choosing as far as your top 5 questions are all specific to identity, which I'm happy about. This event was really intentionally created to talk about the Black experience at SOM. So we made questions that were specific to that. And I'm happy that the next 4 questions revolve around identity and being Black at Yale. So thank you for that. Jordan, I'm going to start with you with the next question. What's like for you as a Black student at SOM?
Whew, I'm sitting here, and what's going on in my mind is I want to be as honest as possible, but also as helpful as possible.
I'm going to encourage you to do both. One thing I appreciate about Jordan is when I met Jordan, it was a day after I read his application, and it was very interesting to run into him the next day for his interview. And I had read his app before then, and he was the same person in his application as he was in person. So I appreciate that. So if I'm gonna use anything as for encouragement for you to continue that on with this event, I'm gonna do so. So be helpful, but also be honest too.
Yeah. So to give you a little background, I come from an HBCU. I went to Howard. So I'm used to this environment where I walk in and I see talented, amazing Black people everywhere. Walking into not just Yale or not just Harvard, not just Stanford, I'm talking about all of the PWIs, right? You enter a space where you are sometimes the only one in the room that looks like you. Sometimes. And for me, coming from HBCU, that was a very like weird cultural shift, right? Other than that, I think once I got here, you also walk into this really beautiful community of students of color that will support you, that will connect you with job opportunities, that will, listen to hip hop music with you. I think that, again, once you get over that hump, right, of, okay, wow, I'm the only person in this room, sometimes you really walk into a really helpful, supportive community.
Appreciate that. And I also appreciate the HBCU plug. I'm also an HBCU grad, and I actually see another one in the crowd. So shout out to you all as well. Steven, how about yourself?
Yeah, Jordan, that was great. So from my background, I went to a PWI for undergrad, and I just remember it getting really draining, especially at the end, to like continue to walk into these classes and see people that don't look like you, and have to like adjust and like react. And I knew that coming into SOM, it was going to be kind of the same thing. But I wasn't really initially prepared to go through that again. And so it was really daunting to kind of start, especially kind of in this COVID world. So start with like not being able to like interact with everyone in person. And like, we're also split up. So they split the class up into 5 different cohorts. And so like, And then they split us up into like specific like learning teams, so like groups of like 8 or 9 that you like pretty much do everything with academically. And I'm the only Black person in that space, and that was kind of my first point of entry into the community when I started. So it was really hard at first to like adjust to that. But I really did find support in groups like the consortium, and the Black Business Alliance that Jordan mentioned before, just to have those safe spaces, that like where you feel supported, where you can like air out something that maybe happened in class or like made you uncomfortable, but like no one else in the class, and like feel like you can talk to that about talk about that to anyone. And so yeah, definitely finding that family and that community really reaffirmed why I chose SOM. And so I will say that I'm still, it's challenging at times, but I definitely do feel supported.
Perfect. Thank you. Ray, how about yourself?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Stephen Jordan said about kind of walking into the room and feeling like you're the only. But when I first started my career after undergrad, I worked in a bank, and my mentor was a person of color. And he told me, no matter as you like grow in your career, as you start to enter these like quote unquote prestigious spaces in business and in your professional life, you're gonna stand out no matter what. And so I think Yale is no different than, like Jordan mentioned, than other business school programs where you feel kind of like very underrepresented. But I think for me, it has been like a big reflection on how I'm gonna stand out no matter what. So how do I wanna stand out? Do I wanna be a person who's late for class, who comes like looking crazy because I have class at 8 a.m. There's definitely people who like come in sweatpants and all that. But for me, like after like reflecting on how I do stand out at SOM, it's been more of an experience of trying to be prepared for like the corporate world after we leave SOM. I want to be a person who is on time, who is on time, who like has read the case, who is like participating in class. So I think for me, it's been an experience of I'm going to stand out no matter what at SOM or at any business school program. So how do I want to like be reflected in that?
Cool. A lot of what the three of you have said alludes to the next top question, which was the third question, which was, what does support look like for you as a Black student at SOM? So I'll start with you, Stephen, since I remember hearing the word support from you, and then Jordan and Ray, please chime in afterwards.
Yeah, I think support for me looks just like having people around me that like understand what like I could be going through, maybe like as a Black person or like as a consultant or like as someone who's like trying to navigate these spaces in the business world. I definitely think like the clubs have really been like the biggest support for me. So like the Black Business Alliance and Consortium specifically. I also, know that we have community and inclusion events that kind of go on that really help as well. I think that one other like really support I've found has actually been in my learning team. I think a lot of people like in this community really do want to kind of understand your background and your different perspectives. And that's been really helpful as well to like also be able to feel supported in a way by people who don't look like me, as well as also going back to like my safe spaces whenever I need to.
Ray?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
go
I
Ray.
can go. Oh, so Stephen mentioned kind of the formal like support that we get, but I've also benefited from those things. But I want to talk more about the informal mentorship networks that are here at Yale. So like when I was doing MLT and applying for business school, I reached out to so many people of color at Yale who like did practice interviews with me, who did readings of my application, read my resume. And then when I actually committed to the school, those people who are now second years, I got to be really close with. And then they've helped me like navigate the school as a first year. And I think that's something that as people of color in a space where we're underrepresented, we always feel like we want to reach back behind us and bring like the next class and help the next class as much as possible. And so I have a roommate who is not a person of color, and she doesn't know that many second years, or she does know them, but is not as close as they are how I am with my second year friends, and I rely on them a lot. So I feel like she kind of gets left out of those experiences. And then I see it in myself too. I've done a lot of mock interviews with people who have reached out on my grad applications, and I was so happy last week because one of my mentees from the BBA and MLT actually decided to come to Yale. And I feel like I'm already forming connections with the next class and providing that type of like mentorship for them. So I feel like in the informal ways, you benefit a lot more than informal ways as well.
Yeah, one thing that I see reigns true. Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
I echo both of these points, and I'll shortly speak on just focusing on the students. I have been, as someone who is perhaps a more radical social rights activist, I think that's a fair way to say, I have been delightfully surprised by the open-mindedness of the student body at Yale. Like you are bringing in an assortment of people who will call out someone else. The idea of using their privilege to say, "Oh no, you shouldn't have said that," or "That was insensitive," or I have plenty of students who are not of color and are just as upset about there being less Black protagonists in case studies, right? You will just as quickly hear a male student comment on how like this seems a little feminist. I'm sorry, this seems a little sexist here. And you're finding like male feminists here. So I think that so far I've been really impressed by the student body. I think they are also another layer of support. Thank you.
Thank you all. That's something I could attest to as well. When it comes to a lot of the work that I do with diversity initiatives and even admissions, I often have students reaching out to me asking how they can help in that process. We're talking to prospective students, talking to students who received interview invites, helping students go through that or navigate that application process. So that level of support definitely translate backwards as well when applicants become students and they're still wanting to reach back and help others and stay engaged and make sure the space continues to look like them after they leave. And I think that's something that's super important, is that support that they show while they're students, but then after as well. So the next highest rated question was, how is diversity talked about at Yale SOM? I'm going to start with Jordan, since we talked about the social radicalness that you have. So let's hear your perspective on that.
It's really, no one ever shuts up about it. And I think it's a very good thing. The school as a structure has been making steps, even though I think it needs to make more. I think all schools need to make more into addressing diversity by making a council for the dean, by being very transparent about the activities. That's the structure of the council. But diversity is talked about with the faculty, it's talked about with the staff, it's talked about amongst all the students, it's talked about within communities of color, and it's talked about within the classrooms, even though it should be talked about more. Ultimately though, as I've been here for the past, around 6 months, no one shuts up about it. And I think that's a really, really good thing.
Steven?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I do think that it could be talked about more, especially in official spaces. So maybe administrative wise, and also in some of our classes. But it's really refreshing to have it come up in spaces that you don't think it will come up in. I could be sitting in my cohort. I remember one person in my cohort, when we started school, inviting me out to coffee just to get to know each other better. And she's not a person of color. And one of her first questions was, yeah, I noticed that there are very few Black students. How do you feel about that? Is there anything we can do? And those kind of conversations, and knowing that people care and that it's always talked about and thought about is really refreshing, and it wasn't something I expected.
Yeah, so my undergrad experience, I went to a very diverse undergrad, and the affinity groups were very strong there, but it almost felt that we kind of self-segregated. And so one of my biggest regrets from undergrad was why didn't I reach out more to people who did not look like me. Like I knew every single Black person, but then after I graduated, I was like, I only know Black people, which is like kind of limiting. And I think everyone comes to SOM, kind of what Steve said, like wanting to get out of their comfort zone and wanting to meet people of different backgrounds, whether that means geographical background, whether that means ethnic background, whether that means professional background, you know? So I've been really surprised at how much people are wanting to get out of their comfort zone and make friends with people who they might traditionally have not reached out to before.
All right, we'll wrap this top 5 questions up with this last question. And unfortunately, it's a question about New Haven, and I'm wondering how deep we can get into that because of COVID, of course. A year ago, this question might have been answered a little bit differently. So I'll just go ahead and ask, and I'll provide some context too, since I'm from the city. But from your perspective as a student, what is life like living in New Haven as a Black student? Let's start with Ray.
I don't know. I think my experience is very different being a Yale student before a Black student, or being a Yale student before a Black person. I will just say, like, I think you have to consider what you want out of your MBA program in terms of like size of the city and everything that's offered. So New Haven, I'm sorry to say, under COVID conditions is not poppin'. There's like 2 bars that are open, and I always have to limit myself. Like I have friends that want to go to these bars, the same bar every single night, and it's like, no, I can't go to the same place. So like I do a lot of, you know, dinners, or like we had wine night last night with my friends. And so I think under those conditions, like you get to know people a lot better because you're in these like more intimate spaces with them, versus like going to a big city where you would go out with your friends for dinner and then see them again like 3 months later because everyone's so busy. So I would just say, like, there's definite pros of living in New Haven and there's definite cons.
I appreciate you letting my city down subtly. Jordan, go ahead.
I have nicer things to say.
Okay.
When I came here, I always remember I was sitting at a bonfire. We were all socially distanced, and it was about 6 of us now. It wasn't 8 of us. It was about 6 or 7 of us, and we were all socially distanced. I was sitting there and I was talking to my friends. There was a young lady who happened to be white, and this is important, by the way, because what she said. And we were in East Rock. That's the location I'm in right now. And she was like, "Oh, yeah, this is the suburbs." And I was like, I just walked 20 minutes east to get some really good hair products. Baby, this is not the suburbs, you know? And as a Black student, you have to think about yourself also with hair care. I always say, if you're moving somewhere, if there is not a location around you that has Black hair care products, that means your people are not there. No. I've been able to find some very good products here. I've been able to go to some amazing restaurants, some great salons, right? And they're walking distance. And that means something to me, right? Because if you ever want to have that moment where you go to the barber shop and you get to, like, you know, chit chat with the barber, you can have that. Or when you go to the shop who's doing the African braiding, like I can like talk to her about how I should make my fufu differently. You know, you still get to have that experience being at Yale, even though when you walk here, you might not think you're that close to authentic Black experiences, but you are. It really is a 20-minute walk.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with that. It's like definitely closer than you think. I remember talking to like a second year last year just about New Haven, and he was like, there's New Haven, like the city, and then there's New Haven, like the bubble, the Yale bubble. And like originally like coming here and like with COVID and everything going on, I like tended to stay in that bubble and like found it really hard to kind of break out of that. But there's so much that the city has to offer if you do that. And yeah, I definitely think that, you know, it's a little bit harder with what's going on, especially with like people, like Ray was mentioning, like a lot of people in our cohort wanting to kind of stay in this bubble and go to like the 2 bars or like the 2 restaurants or like everyone goes to downtown. But if you like really put yourself out there, you can find great things here.
I appreciate the three of you for that. So yeah, to their point, you know, there is a thing called the Yale bubble, and then the lived New Haven experience, and the experiences are very different. As a student, you might experience something different than what people who are from the city experience, of course. But there are people who are here, who work here, who are from the city and are plugged into the city. So if you ever, once you get admitted to the program, once you enroll into the program, if you ever really want to get tapped into what New Haven is actually like outside of what you see on Yale's campus, just simply ask someone. I remember having that conversation with Jordan when he realized that there was a little bit more than what he was able to see initially. And then we had that conversation about what else is out there on the other side of the city. So, you know, if when you come, just ask those questions. It's a lot here to see. There's a lot of culture here. It's super exciting to be able to see a ton of melanin in this room, and that doesn't happen too often. So I appreciate you all joining us for this event. I'm hoping that the top 5 questions were answered and you were able to really get some insight from it. But what we're going to do now is switch things up a little bit. We're going to stop the recording and then have a little bit deeper conversation.